We good? All right, thank you. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Assembly Enterprise and Utility Oversight Committee of the Whole. We're scheduled today, October 26th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. We'll start with member introductions in the room. Start on my left, please.
George Martinez.
Kevin Cross.
Felix Rivera.
Scott Myers.
Meg Zalato.
Zach Johnson, and on the phone, I believe we have member Constant.
Yep, I'm here.
And member Salt.
Here as well, thank you.
And then gentlemen on my right, if you'd introduce yourselves.
Mark Corsentina, General Manager of AWU.
Mark Schimsheimer, Engineering Director, AWU.
Thank you. Under item 3, unfinished business, I don't think we have anyone here today to talk about the Port Alaska Plan of Finance, although we are expecting a presentation from the port next month. So seeing no one correcting me, we'll move on to new business. First, under item A, we have discussion regarding congressional delegated spending and FEMA building resilient infrastructure and communities from Mr. Corsentino.
All right. Good morning, and thank you, Assembly members, for having us here today. I've got a presentation that will cover topics, actually both A and B, which is the CDS and overall grant funding, along with the non-encumbered contract for high mark services for snow removal that was on the Assembly a couple of weeks ago that got postponed for this work session. So the consolidation is grant funding and snow removal services. And what we're trying to do today, the whole goal of this meeting is to have this body understand the utilities workforce business needs with respect to grants and snow removal. And also to make sure there's an overall understanding of our AWU workforce objectives as a whole, which is important. You know, we want to utilize 100% of our staff. I find personally that, MOA, our AWU workforce, they take pride, dedication, accountability, and ownership of their work. I prefer to have them do as much work as they can. It's the right thing to do for those reasons alone. We're always constantly recruiting to fill vacancies. But at the end of the day, there's non-recurring work that has to get done that we can't fund, that could come and go at any time. So that's generally what contractors are for. I don't want to diminish the value of contractors at all because they do good work. But our workforce, in my mind, does better work for the accountability reasons. Nevertheless, there's a purpose and a need for contracted work. And in the work we're going to talk about today, I hope that we make it clear is that, whether we have a 0% vacancy or 100%, 50% vacancy, whatever it is, the proposals for the two topics today, whether it's grant services and snow removal services, we would outsource these components regardless of our vacancies. And I'll explain why. Just the graph shows we do have a high vacancy right now. I don't like that we're in this position, but we are. But we are also actively always recruiting for vacant positions. And so the first topic on the grant funding sources, historically, AWU has not received federal grant dollars very often. It's very rare. Maybe in the 70s when the city was really starting to grow, there were some grant dollars available, but by and large, we fund stuff through our existing rates through equity in the loans. Sometimes we'll get bonds, but at the end of the day, federal grants have been rare. And so but now recently, obviously, through the last couple of years, there's the Infrastructure Act, the ARPA Act, so on and so forth. We didn't necessarily get any dollars from those programs at all. We're still trying, but what it did is it highlighted or emphasized the need for infrastructure at large in Congress. So there has been a heightened awareness, and because of that, the Congress has opened up what I'll call, let's call it the congressionally directed spending, which is kind of similar to the earmarks that were long a while ago that got a bad reputation. This program is similar, but it's different. It's, I think, cleaner. And Murkowski's office has done a phenomenal job of hearing the needs of Alaskans with respect to infrastructure. And it's important to understand that, AWU has a lot of needs. The community has a lot of needs for growth, expansion, economic development. We per our tariff, because we're regulated by the RCA, we can't fund expansion or growth. We have to, our rates are there for our existing customers. So when it comes to expansion and growth, even if it's an area where there's wells that want to be on public water sewer, that's got to be done by other mechanisms than tariff, which generally requires payment, payback, and stuff like that. If we want to expand that without the future customers paying for that, that's got to be done through outside funding. And that's what the CDS is really for. And so it's a good program. So that's the first thing we'll talk about. And then the BRIC grant, which is another grant that we've identified, is building a resilient infrastructure in communities. It's a competitive grant, and we're applying for it with all the delegation. And this is really to reinforce in my mind, the Arctic needs of our community. And honestly, we're targeting our O&M facility. And a couple things we want to do there is consolidate some of our facilities for economy scale reasons, workforce collaboration and growth, and make it a lean, what I'll call kind of green infrastructure. We already are looking for solar. We have hydropower there. It does a lot for us, and it actually opens up some real estate in the Midtown as well, because we look to relocate. It's something we want to do because that building is already undersized for the needs that we have for O&M, but it's a tall order that has suffered because it's a large cost, tall order, and we have to compete with our other core water and wastewater needs. But that's our 24-hour operation facility that's critical to the community. Hence, we're applying for this grant. So with that, so here's the engagement process with the grants. It's been fairly new, so it's a work in progress, and we're always welcome to feedback. And the first thing people say, well, how do you get these projects? And the reality is we have all kinds of plans. We have water master plans, wastewater master plans, facility plans. We get inquiries from whether it's the assembly, the administration, and the public at large. Hey, we want water here. We want sewer here. How do we do that? So we track all that stuff through our various plans. And then what happens is we get kind of a list together. And then once that list is compiled, we go through criteria. And the main things we look at from our perspective is, does it address public health, economic development, public safety, and equitable distribution? Those are the criteria and the weighting of those criteria. And then we'll spit out what we think is an appropriate list to the governing bodies, which is this body, the administration, and then let them decide, because ultimately that's who I answer to, the utility answers to. And then what we've done with that ultimate list with, there's an example of an assembly ordinance in conjunction with the administration, we'll send that then to Congress, in particular Murkowski for the CDS funds. And then her office would take all those projects, what we've asked for, and spit out what she thinks is appropriate, what she heard and what she thinks is relevant. And then we'll see where it lands. And so where that goes to is the next thing. So here's how that has worked out in the last 2 years, because it's only going on for the last, year or two, even less. So the first round of CDS for Murkowski's office, we were awarded $20 million. It was on the sewer side. We put in more than that, but that was what was awarded. And one of the things down there that's important is, ironically, solid waste is here. One of the things that was important for us in collaboration with solid waste is that we have an existing permit out there for our wastewater plant. And right now that wastewater plant treats and landfill leaching. Solid waste pre-treats it, we treat it again, and then it's discharged into Cook Inlet. Nevertheless, we've identified that as a source of, at least optically, a weakness in the permit, because landfill leachate is somewhat toxic and it's not the best waste stream at all. It's always, landfill leachate's difficult to treat nationwide and worldwide. It's one of those materials that people just don't like, and it's very difficult to treat. Some wastewater plants won't even take it. You can, and we do, but at the end of the day, as we're looking for alternative sources, we identified that several years ago before we started this permit renewal process, and Murkowski stepped up and gave us money to look for alternative disposal methods for landfill leachate. So that was an award. Now, a couple things on the award. It's still pending our EPA application, so we don't have the money in hand, but we're teeing everything up to get that ready to implement. And there are some other projects, one of them being Holton Hills sewer expansion, and then also expansion for Powder Reserve sewer expansion. So those are the projects that equated to $20 million that's been awarded pending application with EPA. In 2024, we submitted a list to Murkowski as well through the administration, and came up with a number of projects. Some of them may be familiar. The Member Salty Eldon subdivision, one of those water sewer well septic areas that needs water. Again, we can't pay for that, but we can certainly apply for grants. And we put a number of projects like that on that list that got through. And she's come back through her committee. Is that right, Mark? This committee list that says, okay, I'm not going to give you name projects, but I'm going to give you a blend of projects that are for water expansion and public health needs. And likewise, we've got about $13 million on water that's come our way, but that's not awarded. Still has to go through the congressional process, and we have to fish out and understand what was really in that package that she ultimately approved. So that's still in queue, but we were optimistic of success, and that would be great. And then we're still working on the competitive grant for that brick grant as well. So here's the purpose of this meeting today. We have a core base employees that do capital work all the time. We, on average, spend about $30 million a year in capital improvements to make sure we maintain and keep our system resilient and upgraded. We'd be doubling that capital program by taking on another $20-30 million every year. That's beyond what we can accept. So what we're proposing, and what's fairly common in industries, when you have a temporary program that could last for a year or two or go away permanently, is we're proposing to put an RFP out there to have a project management office, program management office. I kind of use their words interchangeably. Basically, to have a separate group of a contractor who's local, so we can help increase the economic value to the community by using local contractors. You leverage their expertise and experience in this, because grants implementation, there are what I'll call red tape parts that are tricky, and there are consultants out there that do just grant implementation. So we want to leverage that expertise. And the reality is we can expand, contract, or just get rid of the contract permanently if the grant dollars don't show up. So it's one of those things that's there. We don't want to hire brand new staff and then lay them off a few years later because the grant dollars have gone away. So this is a way to utilize their experience and keep it in the community and leverage that to benefit this program. Ironically, one of the last times we got kind of outside funding was, of all things, when the Clutha Water Project first went online back in the 80s. There was a whole separate office that was a program management, project management office that was separate from the utility that ran the whole project. That was $150 million back in the 80s. And they had like 20 employees that, they were there for that time frame, and then they're gone. And so the proposal here is we do want to do a program project management office for these reasons. And then what we'll do, our proposal with concurrence from this body, would be to advertise that pretty quick here with concurrence from this body, do an competitive RFP process, and hopefully award this as early as March, so that by that time we expect at least that first round of dollars to show up, so we can start implementing the leachate improvements and some of these other projects in anticipation of also getting further projects. So that's it in a nutshell for the PMO side. So we're going to go to snow removal, but I want to pause here and allow questions or clarifications, comments.
Yeah, thank you. First, let me just state for the record that member Bronga joined us at 11:05 and member Brawley at 11:09. And I don't currently have anybody in the queue. Is there anyone who has a question? Ms. Cross?
Yeah, just a couple of questions on things you spoke about. Obviously, as we're pursuing these grants historically have been a little fickle and arduous in the application process. And so when you can get those funds, oftentimes it's far out there. Has there been any recent conversations about creating a utility bank, which would allow us to, I know you're probably familiar with a utility bank, but I don't know if AWW has been in touch with any other parts of the administration, or, because I really think a utility bank that would allow us to bond for specific projects and then pay them back. And then we've got the Port Trust Fund, we've got Solid Waste Services Trust Fund. We could be reinvesting into our own communities, which is done around the country, and then aggregating those towards a portion of their property taxes, because land with utilities has vastly greater value than land without utilities, and pay it back over a 20 or 35-year period, which would be minimal financial impact on those particular lots, but would allow us another tool in order to expand our utilities that we desperately need, because that's the number one obstruction to housing that our planning department has said for Anchorage. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the utility bank. And then if you could give me an update on where we're at on updating our master plan, because the most recent one I have, and when we expect that to come out. Thank you.
Yeah, great comments, Member Cross. And to that point, I think it's a great idea. Devil's in the details, obviously, but at the end of the day, I would support that. I think it's a great idea. I'll leave it at that. There's kind of a start of that a little bit through the Mike Robbins' group to have an infrastructure bank, as I believe. Right. It's early in its discussions. It's not exactly directly for utilities, but I think we're part of that discussion. Mark has been part of that discussion. Really, that I would be happy to support that. We would support that, but we'd want to go through the administration to carry that on. So any way that can happen, we'd support it. And there's ways. I have several ideas of how to work that. I'm not going to share them now because I'd rather go through the administration first, but great idea. And it'd be supported, and I think it's great. As far as the master plan, like I said, we have several master types of plans, water master plans, wastewater master plans. Currently, we're working on our water master plan. There's a couple. It's being worked on, and we hope to have. Do we have a draft schedule? And we hope to have that out. But before you answer that, okay. Well, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces of that right now, particularly when our primary water source is being evaluated closely in conjunction with the Fish and Wildlife Study. So we're kind of waiting to see how all that stuff shakes out in some respects. But at the end of the day, it is incorporating all the projects that we have seen, and we incorporate some of these grant request type projects in there. So it's being worked on. Won't be finalized until the dust is settled on a few other items, but yes. And then on the sewer side, once the water master plan is done, then we'll carry on over to the sewer master plan. And do we have a time in our unfortunately, our budget meeting's tomorrow, so I guess maybe I'll save that question for tomorrow. We'll have to verify what year it's budgeted at. So they're both in the queue in our capital improvements plan, because that's how we fund those, the water and wastewater master plans. I don't know the exact date, but by tomorrow I could give you that answer.
Member Brawley.
Yeah, thank you. I think continuing on the same line of questions or comments from Member Cross, two things come to mind, or I guess questions. In your master plan, to what extent are you contemplating essentially where we can put infrastructure to support housing development, and specifically redevelopment of existing areas that maybe don't have sewer? So I'll use the example of Spenard, right? There's lots of places in that area that don't have that. So that's the first question.
Okay, so to answer that question, what we do is we put in there economic growth and expansion, and what we do, that's regular in our water master plans and our sewer master plans. But what we do is we always leave a queue in there, funding sources to be identified. Because a lot of times, and it may even lead to a sub regional plan. In other words, one of our old water master plans led to the Sand Lake Regional Water and Sewer Master Plan back in 2000s. And that because there was such a focus in that area. And same thing, though, we listed specific projects that could be done and went through community involvement and support. But it still left there's always a line in each of those projects, funding to be determined. Outside funding is required and needed, unless they do improvement districts, which don't always have a high chance of success. And so to that point, it will address projects that we could identify. And the stakeholder involvement is important in there, including, we would give, once we're getting further along the line and identifying a draft water master plan, we'd come before this body. We go before a board, this body, and the administration, so they're all aware of what's in there and take feedback.
And just to follow up on that, I would really encourage somehow linking it with, or at least reviewing our current land use plan, because we have areas that are specifically designated as areas that we would anticipate future upzonings, the kind of housing density. And of course, there's we're not always good about following through on that plan. So so that's something that we want to make sure that we're linking up all these different components of it, especially given the importance of infrastructure. And then the other thing I'll mention, I don't know if you'll have an answer for this right now, but one issue that I really would like to explore further, it seems like a lot of our code where we require private development to build out new water and sewer. I understand the rationale for that. It works when you're building new subdivisions. It doesn't seem to work so well with a lot of the situations we have, again, with redevelopment. So areas that are already built out, and then we essentially put the cost of what arguably should have been in the ground 40 years ago and just was never built on the people who happen to be building and own that one property. And so I think that's unfair personally. I understand that's how things work now, but I don't know if you have initial thoughts about how to address that, but I wonder if we can decouple the expectations we have for building out, say, a new subdivision, where you can recoup that cost versus, like I said, infill development that is fundamentally often a different scale and then puts a different level of burden on the property owner.
So to answer that, obviously we're welcome to input and feedback on that. And what I would say to that is I could provide further feedback, but I'd need a little more granularity. In other words, if you have an existing water and sewer assets in an area that's now changing from single family to multifamily or commercial, the same assets likely can be used. If they can't be, then there's an upsizing cost and whatnot that does need to be considered. And I think our tariff spells all that out. I'll leave it at that for now, but I'm certainly happy to carry that conversation on with more granularity and questions. But that's a fairly broad question. It's a good one. But at the end of the day, I'd want to look at each situation separately, but I understand your concerns.
Yeah, I think this is certainly not the end of that conversation, but I, again, just really want to flag that a lot of our code was built with the idea that we were expanding outward, and then the mechanisms that you use to do that. And now when we're looking at really rebuilding what we have, I think we have to think differently about again, those expectations and responsibilities.
Sure.
So, thank you.
We can always propose tariff changes, but they'll have to go before the RCA. But if we have a clean slate and a good plan, there's no reason not to submit it.
Okay, I don't see anyone else, so let's go ahead and talk about snow removal.
All right. Okay, so at a high level, we're obviously a very large organization geographically from Cluton all the way down to Girdwood. And we have approximately 150 sites and facilities, if you will, for water and sewer, and spread from Cluton to Girdwood. And there's a map on the following slide that will show that exhibit, if you will. So, and along with the 7,600 or so hydrants we have to maintain as well in the wintertime, or year round, but in the wintertime too. So the way we do that, we have our internal plumbers and various groups, our field services at our headquarters buildings, our dist ops, they do all the water facilities throughout that whole area. Treatment plants have their own staff. And then our O&M group has their systems maintenance staff that takes care of our headquarters, and the buildings and ground staff take care of the remote sewer facilities, the lift stations and stuff like that. They all do this work, but it's in my mind, it's other duties assigned and somewhat voluntary. And that may sound strange, but the reality is sometimes it's forced voluntary work. For instance, the dist op staff, and I'll kind of show you the next slide too, to kind of show that they have to sample all these sites on a regular basis. So they've got to go out there and make sure our water quality standards are being met. And that's critical. That's our drinking water. So as they go out there, and if there's just snowfall, the first thing they got to do is plow it out first before they can take samples. That's going to lead to overtime because they may not get their sampling routes done that day. So they're going to have to stay until they get the sampling routes done. Some other areas, like at headquarters, for instance, there may be times where we'll come in early, especially at headquarters. They had to come in early and overtime because we have to have it plowed up before the customers show up, right? So there's various competing needs and interests. At the end of the day, our staff have asked us for help in supplementing their work. They have a lot of core work to do. They've got to go to these facilities and do sampling. They've got to do maintenance, and they've got to be ready for emergency water main breaks and sewer main breaks. If they're out plowing and all the time, that takes away from their wellness, quite frankly. And while overtime may be nice for the pocketbooks, not good necessarily for their well-being. So what they've asked us to do is help supplement that work. It's not core work for them. It's either other duties assigned or just a component of the work they got to do in the first place. So the intent is we're not replacing employees at all. We're actually, at their request, helping them meet their business, or the utilities business needs with contracting. And what we're going to do is make sure that, we show the map. So what we're proposing is a couple things. Originally, we had put in one advertisement, request for proposal or invitation to bid to do all the sites, whether it was our headquarters buildings or O&M buildings, and then all these various remote sites throughout the Anchorage Bowl and northern communities in the Eagle River and the Girdwood. There was kind of a unbalanced bid. Contractors can be savvy, and so we broke it out. And so the one you saw just at the assembly meeting back a couple weeks ago on AM 785 2023 is just for 66 of about 150 sites. We're not going to do it all because some of those sampling routes, for instance, we have to have our staff go first. But while they're sampling, they don't want to go out and plow the other 35 sites because they still got to do their core work. So they're asking for help in that. And it's as if they want to do that, I'm all for them letting them do it first, but they want the availability to have a contractor come out and do that too. A couple things to keep in mind historically. We have had contractors do plowing work at all our various sites throughout the utility over time. A lot of times we go back and forth, to be honest with you, on who does that, simply because sometimes when it's a busy snow year, our contractor while it says they have to show up within a couple hours of that day, they may not show up for a day or two, and then we're underwater, if you will, or under snow specifically, and that does not help us. So we want to have all the resources and tools we can to make sure that our operations and our facilities are accessed, maintainable for ourselves and our customers, and it's just another tool in the tool chest to help us be able to do that. So it's an extension of our staff as needed. Our employees are going to have their first right to perform the work, but if they need help, we're going to offer that. And that's what this whole thing is about. It absolutely will not replace employees because more often than not, it's done in overtime, a voluntary basis anyway. I think so. Specifically, what you're going to see again on the 7th is this AM. And by the way, on the last slide, this AM, I've made some proposals, which we'll talk about in a minute here to clean it up, because I think that the AM itself had some language. It wasn't properly reviewed by myself. We missed something. I'm clarifying it here. But we're going to have this contract on there. It's non-encumbering as needed. Likewise, concurrently, because the original contract consolidated other facilities, it led to unbalanced bids and some unfavorable conditions for the utility. We broke out the Arctic, our headquarters, and 2 of our septic stations. That is a separate contract that was concurrently at the same time advertised as the other contract, but because it's lower value, it's not going to go before the assembly, but I want to be transparent that it's there too. That's going through purchasing now, and that's just for our headquarters and then two of our remote facilities on the sewer side. The main thing before this body will be the 2023 AM 2023 785 2023, which has about half to 2/3 of our other remote facilities that our staff needs help with, and they're asking for help for. And one final thing I heard when I heard at the meeting, pricing. How does that compare? Well, there's no direct comparisons necessarily, because different sites that are high elevation may require different equipment. You can use front end loaders, dump trucks, plow trucks, sanding trucks. It takes all of those different types of tools necessary to do this. So it just depends on where you're at. It's hard to get a direct comparison, but what there is out there is that in last year when the bids for snow removal for downtown were out there, the trucking, there's a bid price that we saw, which is about $130 an hour. We compare that with last year because of the Snowzilla event. It was all hands on deck and an MOA, and we have CDL truck drivers because when we do our emergency excavations and repairs, we have dump trucks and we haul gravel on a regular basis. And so in lieu of doing that, after our normal hours, we had staff volunteer their time on overtime to also haul snow and using our equipment. So the rate we charged the street maintenance for that work was, and this is on overtime rates, is $150 an hour. So on overtime, our staff are about, and that's fully burdened, meaning wet, with fuel and equipment. It's about $150 an hour. The contractor from MOA, at least the first contract that I saw, was about $130 an hour. So it's comparable. If our staff were on overtime, it'd be about the exact same rate. So my whole point there is there's not necessarily a direct comparison, but you have a point of reference and it's about equivalent. So with that, here's some edits I'm proposing. I think the AM originally as it was written, my apologies for that, was poor because it made it sound like we're replacing AWU work. And I think I'm clarifying here, it's always been done in part by AWU staff. We've always had supplemental contracts, and our staff are requesting more outside assistance and to focus on their core work, and we support that. So with that, questions?
I have Chair Zaltel in the queue and then myself.
Thank you. Thanks. I appreciate the clarification in the AM. I think that language that you are proposing to delete is what raised the first red flag. One thing I asked at the assembly meeting that wasn't answered is how, I understand this is a non-encumbering contract, so I don't get to see a fund cert, but how are you planning to pay for this? Is this using any room in your labor budget? Is this already something that's been planned for? That was something we couldn't get kind of to at the meeting. Thanks.
Great question. No, it's a non-labor expense and it is in our budget. Whether we have enough for it depends on the snow. But we have anticipated, I think it was 350. So that would be in our budget. Whether we actually expend that's different though, obviously. That's what I was clarifying, but it is non-labor. It's not using labor budget at all.
Okay, great. Yeah, that takes care of my primary concern was that we weren't using contract services and paying for them using labor funds where we had or could use our local labor to take care of the service. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And being new to the body, I'd be curious, how does this compare with past practices? Have we historically contracted this out? Is this the first time we're talking about contracting out to clear these 66 sites?
No, well, a little bit. It's always been a blend. And it's like I said, it's gone a little bit back and forth. We have used contractors to do some of our remote sites in the past. We're stepping up a little bit on our in-house facilities, meaning at headquarters and King Street. We've actually more often than not used contractors, but because of what I said earlier, that we've had delays in getting response from contractors at times, we've decided to do it in-house, but that's caused some heartburn and wellness issues. But the remote sites, some of them have been contracted out because they're difficult to access, and there's some contractors have better equipment that we don't have on our normal day-to-day basis to better utilize that. So it's a trial, and some of it's a trial and error, to be honest with you. We may expand this down the road if it's successful. If it's not successful, we may retract it. We want to watch and learn and see how this works out because we have businesses we have to take care of, and access to our facilities during high snow winter events or even icing events is challenging.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that you guys kind of provided the sort of basic cost analysis about what you think it would cost the contract versus having employees perform these duties. This is somewhat new. I mean, I guess I would hope that there's some sort of after action review at the end of the year to where we can actually kind of see, I mean, how well did it pencil out, right? Like, what is the more cost efficient route? But another question I would ask is you mentioned that the AWWU employees are, you said, given sort of the first option, like, if they have the time or interested in taking on as an additional duty, that they get the first shot at that. Is that something that's they're entitled to contractually, or is this just sort of a kind of handshake mutual understanding, like, yeah, well, we'll ask you and then we'll go to the other guys?
Well, there's two things in that. Well, it goes both ways. We can actually force them to do the work too, if need be. And so we don't like to do that. But if push comes to shove, it falls under other duties as assigned. And honestly, like I said earlier, I'd have to look at the contracts. I don't think it's, well, some of the it's more in the position descriptions, like buildings and grounds. It is clearly in their position descriptions. The other staff, it may be more other duties assigned. Whether it's actually in their contract, the plumber's contract, it's a good question. I don't know, but the reality is because the contracts are tied to the position descriptions of what they're hired to do, there is a connection and a tie to force them to do the work, and we want them to do the work if they want to do that. Because we, like I said, we get better service when they do it. I think, at least historically, we have, but also recognize the downsides of it.
Yeah, that's understandable, and certainly, we want to be mindful of employee burnout. I'm just trying to imagine what's the probability that we're going to be getting calls somewhere down the road from plumbers saying, I used to have this opportunity to do this work and accrue some overtime, and now it's being taken away from me.
If they want to do it, they will have that. There won't be any objections from us.
Okay, thank you. Member Bronga.
Hello. I was wondering, so if you get really prepared, a lot of times it won't snow.
Yeah.
So
Fine with me.
if you didn't need this service, am I understanding that it's as needed, so we wouldn't spend the,
No charge.
okay, great, thanks.
Anyone else? No? All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And next on the agenda, we have item C. Ivalo, if you'd like to come up. All right, thanks, gentlemen. Just real quick, we're on item C here. It's AO 2023-88, authorizing the borrowing and accepting from the State of Alaska Clean Water Fund an aggregate amount not to exceed $25,760,000 for the purpose of financing a portion of 2 solid waste services capital improvement projects and providing for related matters. Just for the record, before you guys start, would you just state your names?
Ivalo Filitaula. Andy Repking. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity that we have this morning to share our presentation with you all. Okay, first item that we have, item C. I remember this is something that we discussed real briefly the other evening at the assembly about the Clean Water Fund. I'm going to have my engineer, Andy, help me answer, maybe talk about this a little bit real quick.
So the Clean Water Fund, it just became available to us after we settled the NOV that we had. So we're able to access those funds now. It's the lowest cost of borrowing that there is. I think it's like 0% or something really close to it. it's advisable to use that over any other sources of funding that would be at a higher interest rate. And we can use it for clean water projects, such as relining the last few remaining cells at the landfill and then upgrading the ponds.
Thanks. Unless there's more you guys can share right now, we can go ahead and start with some questions. Sure. So I started with some questions, and first I have Chair Zalatel.
Thanks. I have 3 questions. So the budget, for SWS remains separate and is paid for by ratepayers. So is there any impact to ratepayers with this loan? And then the second question with regard to the loan specifically, are there any conditions in accessing the Clean Water Fund that are separate conditions placed onto the operations of SWS that don't currently exist? Because sometimes money comes with strings. And so is there anything that you would have to change about your operations or anything like that based on the terms of what's provided in this type of funding?
I think as long as the project's approved by, the Clean Water Fund loan and we execute the project to the T, then there's no additional restrictions. But the money for clean water needs to be used to serve the purpose of, clean water. So we can line the landfill with it and finish lining the last remaining cells. And we can also, line the ponds and do the pond upgrade project with those funds. And, we'll be paying back the loan at a 0% interest. So it would be the same as what we would have otherwise charged the ratepayers to, finish the last remaining work at the landfill regardless. So I don't think it'll come with an additional burden to the ratepayers from what we would have otherwise normally done.
Okay, excuse me. Okay, that's helpful. It says in here, though, the loan terms actually include a 4%. There's some language about a finance charge. And so this doesn't say that it is a 0% loan. So I'm not 100% sure how those two things interact. And often when we do loans, it's the CFO's office is in charge of that. And so I don't know, is the CFO's office been involved in the creation of this and working through the terms?
They were working on it, but we no longer have a CFO at the moment. So we just have an acting CFO for.
Yep, but
for
I
solid
see
waste.
the acting municipal CFO who's filling out and might be coming up to your rescue here. What I'm trying to get at is 2 questions, really. One, is there an interest rate or something that's going to possibly make a change for the ratepayers? And 2, who's kind of in control of this financing program? Is it the SWS CFO's office, or is it a combination thereof, or how are we doing it? Thank you.
Sure. My name is Ross Roosevelt, the Public Finance Manager. I'm sitting in for Alden Thurn this week as acting CFO, Mr. Johnson. And Mr. Johnson and Ms. Zalatel. We work as a team with the solid waste services staff, and we want the solid waste services and other entities in the municipality to participate in the Clean Water Loan Fund and the Drinking Water Loan Fund at the state. Typically, it's been my understanding in the past that these are 1% loans, maybe 1.5% loans. Now, I haven't looked at this document, but that's typically what it's been. But with the rate increase over the past year or so, that's been the rate historically. Okay, and the CFO ultimately does, once the contract, it's a boilerplate contract from the state. You sign it or you don't get the loan. And the solid waste services staff review it with the state, and then I do believe they send it to the CFO for signature. So he is the ultimate authority on debt and investments for the municipality. I presume this is all part of the rate base that the ratepayers would pay an interest rate, they would pay the expense for this. Now, I mentioned earlier that we want them to take advantage. We want solid waste services, AWW, others to take advantage of all of these loans that they can before we sell tax exempt debt for them, because even tax exempt debt would have a higher interest rate on it that the ratepayers would be responsible for.
Thank you. That's helpful. I have one more question. So we've been raising ratepayers' rates at solid waste services kind of consistently, partly in order to implement the master plan. So is this something that was contemplated in the master plan, and is this built into the rate increases that we've been, briefed on over the course of the last several years and kind of the trajectory they were going to take? Or are we going to see a request to raise ratepayer rates above and beyond what we were already briefed on?
I believe it's already been incorporated in the master plan, and this was always the plan moving forward. And the rate increases to keep up with inflation, and it's the same rate increases, no change to them.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And then I have myself in the queue, and this might reveal my lack of technical understanding, but we just had the folks from AWW talk in part about trying to get congressionally delegated funds to cover some of the leachate treatment, which it sounds like there's overlap between AWWU and SWS there. And some of what you guys are talking about here with this loan is also applies to leachate. So can you talk about just how those two projects interact with each other? Are they independent? Are they codependent? Will more congressional delegated spending for AWWU possibly offset some of SWS costs? Can you just kind of frame that for me?
Yeah, so we have the project manager from AWWU managing the leachate upgrade project, and they went and applied for the grant money for it. We'll see if they get it or not, and then we've got this kind of on the side just to help fund it if needed.
So while I like the idea of low interest rate loans, I like even more the idea of using federal dollars to pay for projects. So is the amount we need or are asking for in this loan going to be affected by what we get from that congressional delegated funding ask?
Mr. Johnson, if I may, fellas, of course, we would always use free money first, federal and state loan grants, across the board for any enterprise and the municipality itself. And we've seen in the past where the solid waste services have forecasted the use of even the clean water loans or tax exempt debt that public finance would help them with under the CFO. And then they come back and say, hey, we just got a grant that takes care of that. So we don't need to, so you can reduce your forecast for debt either at the state or with tax exempt debt. We see that happen commonly, and it's a good thing.
So is it fair then to say that that's kind of an open question when it comes to this, the leachate upgrades?
So, what is the question then, Mr. Johnson?
Is there any reasonable expectation that this congressionally delegated funding will reduce what we are going to ask for in this loan here? Is there any possibility that this $26 million number will come down depending on what sort of response we get?
Well, I'd refer to these folks, Mr. Johnson, but what I see is that this leachate project is a part of the Integrated Solid Waste Services Master Plan. It's a giant plan, and they're going after a piece at a time here. And so if sometimes the grants are awarded to the enterprise funds for a specific project, and so if there's a duplication, then they're again going to spend the free money first.
And to add to that, I would think that we would ask for the full amount here to fund the project. And then if the free money comes through, we just don't use the money that's going to cost us the higher interest rate, but we still apply for it.
If I may, Mr. Johnson, typically as I see these requests going to the assembly, I think this is at the stage where giving approval to apply for the loan. Okay, doesn't commit them to do anything. Doesn't commit them to take the loan. It just gives them the opportunity to apply for the loan, and so therefore it probably falls into their budget. And now they've got an unencumbered budget, and they can proceed with the project. And then when grants or the loan come in, they pay. So basically, I like to refer to it as we buy things with unencumbered budget. We pay for the invoices with cash or loan proceeds.
Okay, thank you. That helps. And then I don't see anyone else. So member Raleigh hasn't asked yet, and then we'll go to member Zalatel.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just looking at the first page of the ordinance, and it mentions that these are in the Alaska Clean Water Fund intended use plan. So, so it sounds like this is, as you guys have said, this has been planned for a while. But my question is, are there any other? I guess if we're focusing on these projects, I want to make sure that we're not that there isn't like an opportunity cost, or that there aren't other projects out there that we would want to be contemplating, I guess, from the state, knowing that there's probably a finite number of projects for the Alaska Clean Water Fund. So I'm just wondering if you could speak to kind of what, maybe my question is more, what is that intended use plan, and how does this fit into that?
So these were the projects that we identified as the best use for this clean water fund. And it would be the design to finish out the remaining cells at the landfill, and then the construction to line the remaining cells at the landfill, and then whatever we can use towards the leachate lagoon upgrade project construction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Zalatel.
Thank you. I think I'd like to see, or what I'll plan to do is when this comes back before us, an amendment, really just on line 26 on page 1, it says is a favorable rate. That could mean a lot of things. I think I would like to put in like expected to be between 0 and 1.5%, because a favorable rate, because there's some other language in this ordinance kind of in the details that's required that I think make it confusing. And then I think I would like to put in there that there's no intention that this will have an unanticipated impact on ratepayers. So I just need you all to go back and like triple check that that's true. I've heard you say it, but like, let's just triple check that we aren't anticipating anything there. Because I just want it to be clear, particularly to ratepayers, that this isn't going to be a reason we're going to be coming back and saying your rates are going up. Thank you.
Yeah, member Cross.
Yeah, just on that, in the traditional commercial market, by the way, if you're doing CapEx or in business improvements, that rate currently is around 9 to 11%. So if you weren't getting a municipally backed bond or something like that, now the bond rate currently for municipal bonds on anything over 10 years is about 3.6, 3.5. And this says as long as it stays below 4, it'll stay at 1.5%. And then just in small aggregate, if it ever goes above 4. But we're a fraction of inflation. So I think when you say favorable rate, I would almost say that's an understatement when you look at the cost of other money. But so, I mean, nothing's better than close to 0. But if you're getting anything in this market now, unless you're dealing with municipal bonds or you're dealing with taxpayers who are subsidizing things, then you're, anything under 8 to 9% is tremendous. It is extremely, extremely expensive right now to get capital for any kind of business or infrastructure improvements, obviously, unless you're dealing with utilities. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we have 10 minutes left, and I believe we're also going to get a presentation from you all on the free programs and financial impact. And I guess just for planning purposes, since we don't want to go past 12, is there anyone who would be sticking around here for audience participation if there's time at the end? If not, then you guys have the full 9 minutes. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So we prepared this slide a few months ago with our CFO that was with us at the time. So I just ask of you, just kind of bear with us. We're going to go through the slide in hopes to share the purpose of our presentation, and we'll go from there. Okay. Okay. So as you all know, Solid Waste Services, it's an enterprise. It's self-funded, which is supported by our ratepayers. I'm going to ask Kelly if you can help me out here. Sure.
For the record, Kelly Toth, part of Solid Waste Services. This was the first time in 2021 with our previous CFO that the enterprise utility had its own standalone financial statement. So BDO put that together, and they were very complimentary with all the work that was done to split that out and have its own. You can find a copy of this on our website. And then just as a reminder too, we had the $109 million bond funding that occurred, and they got that AA rating, which was unexpected, and glad to see that. So to Member Zalatel's point, SWS is supported by the customer base. And as you know, we have collections, we have disposal, then we have the 3 facilities in that disposal aspect that we manage and run. And then we also have we do the collections, and we have curbside, refuse, recycling, and compost, which is coming to an end here in the next couple days. We do have a strategic plan. There's been some conversations about the master plan that's there. All of these plans can be found on our website. The strategic plan runs through 2026, so we're starting to ramp up now so that we can get the new strategic plan in place. Here's an example of our 3 main disposal sites: the landfill, the new central transfer station, that's the old one, and then the Girdwood transfer station. And thank you for all of you who came to our grand opening too, by the way. So there's operations there, the collections, utility, and the things that you see there. We mentioned those. We also have our mandated service area. So everything within that boundary is where we do our collections, the collection services. So this is where we start talking about all of the things that we do really to invest in our community. We have a new group of people here that are leading SWS, and so kind of going around the dial for one calendar year, there were several programs that we were not aware of that the community really expected as an investment for SWS. So we just wanted to bring those items to light here. We have the Anchorage Citywide Cleanup Orange Bag Program. That is the 55th year, was partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, and we estimated about $14,000 in foregone revenue for that program. Again, as Uvalu mentioned, our CFO is not with us now, so these were her information that she provided for us back in July. The curbside or the cleanup program, the yellow bags, which is the Adopt a Highway and Creek cleanup programs, was about $3,000 in foregone revenue. So we're just going to run through these fairly quickly. We had the mobile home program where we offered up 42 letters that were issued to the mobile home park, and that was about $85,000 in foregone revenue. We have the online free pass program. You'll recall in years past, we had just like a 1 or 2 day free dump day. And with the advent of COVID, we ended up going online and offering these free passes. And then we also have the 38 hauler letters that were authorized for free disposal, and then the spring cleanup activities as well. So you can we're just kind of giving you an idea of all of the investments that we did for the community. And then the property tax annual free pass, that's an estimated 14,000 free passes for about 220,000 in foregone revenue. And then other programs that we offer were relationships with the Fort Rich military construction, the Elmendorf Air Force personnel, the 50% recycling for residual, which we're working on revamping that policy. And then the woodlot, accepting free material from the woodlot, and then the C Street woodlot, which I don't believe opened this last year. That was run by AFD. Other no charge loads that we have is our alternate cover programs, the Eagle River Parks and Chugach Eagle River Road Board Association roadkill programs, and the community composting are all examples of other no charge or discounted loads. We have our organics pilot program. We offered up a pilot program for some landscapers for a half price tipping fee just to see if it would actually work. I think it resulted in a lot more volume diverted out of the landfill. So we're making plans in looking at the old central transfer station as a possibility. We're going to be doing a request for proposal for that to stand up perhaps. We're doing a feasibility study or a business plan basically to make sure that it's self-sustaining to be an organics management transfer station. One more thing there, we had a commercial and demolition new policy where items needed to be shredded, loads needed to be shredded before they were disposed. And so that's a discounted program, as well as the community composting is free at the central transfer station. And through the time that it's operating. Community grants this year, we still do the youth litter patrol through Alpar, the Christmas tree recycling through Alpar, Alaska Plastic Recovery. We hosted them. If you came out and saw the grizzly wood, which is a product that can be used for post-consumer plastic and turned into like a Trex type material. So we hosted them for a month. And then we also did with Anchor Gardens, the previous picture, we did 5 backyard composting classes and 5 vermicomposting and 2 master garden classes with our relationship with Anchor Gardens. So that resulted in over 100 people that now know how to compost and vermicompost themselves, which is kind of the idea of this new group, the Anchorage Compost Coalition, which is to find ways to compost in place. And you can see the whole lot of diversion programs that we do offer. That is a picture of one of the Anchor Gardens classes, but you can see all of the efforts that we're working on to try to increase diversion and extend the life of the landfill. So all told, with the community investment, we've estimated it to be over 1.5 million is what SWS invests in our community. We just wanted to have that be a good conversation with all of you. Just any questions that you might have. We may not be able to give you exact specifics if you're asking financial questions, but we definitely will take your questions and we'll be able to answer them offline. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, thanks. We're coming, we've got about 2 minutes left. So I see Ms. Brong and then Member Brawley. And if you can keep your questions quick, that would be appreciated. Well, we have another meeting at 12:10 of the Budget and Finance Committee, so I'm hesitant to go that route.
I really appreciate the dump passes, and I'm hoping that this spring, there's not a repeat of where you go to the website to get your free pass and it says sold out, even though it says you can apply before May 31st or something. And then it started saying sold out. And I appreciate that the people who missed out, you honored some passes, but that was a real problem. I had tons of emails about that. And the other thing, I'm not sure the reasoning of skinning down the amount of time you could use your free dump pass. It used to be good for a year. And I think this year it was good for 6 months. And if we don't give opportunities to dump the trash, they end up behind Northway Mall or behind the Botanical Gardens. It's sad but true. So we want to clean up our city.
Thanks. Member Brawley, do you have something quick?
Yeah, I would just be curious, we could talk offline. I'm curious kind of what your communications are to the public. Like, do you have a communications officer? Because kind of building on what Member Bronga said, I think there's often this expectation that we just get things for free. And I appreciate you showing basically the revenue foregone by offering these free programs. I think they're important. But I also would offer that in addition to folks, having that opportunity, that we can also be better about explaining that we do have to pay for things and that we should not be free dumping on other people's property. I think I think we all agree that's inappropriate, and too many people do it here. So I would just offer, I would be interested in kind of what your current communications are, and if there's ways that we could increase that over time, to again help educate the public about the fact that this is a service that we all pay for and why we pay for it. Thank you.
All right, with that, thank you everybody for being here, and we are adjourned.